With his head full of worries, Samuel wandered around the house. On one of these wanderings, he decided to go up to the attic to get an old photo album. The dim light of the flashlight revealed a dusty place full of memories. Boxes and furniture covered with sheets looked like ghosts from the past. Samuel felt like an explorer, unearthing the history of his own life. When he moved a box, his foot hit something on the floor. Curious, he bent down. It was not a piece of wood or a nail, but a small metal lever stuck to the floor. Dust hid the object, but the silvery sheen of the metal stood out. With some effort, Samuel pulled the lever. A metallic click broke the silence of the attic. Slowly, a part of the floor lifted, revealing a door that did not seem to have been made for the house. The door was made of a strange material that Samuel did not recognize. It was neither wood nor ordinary metal. It seemed to have the texture of stone, but it shone with a silvery light. The handle, a smooth sphere, was cold. A cold wind came out of the crack, giving Samuel goosebumps. He felt a strong attraction, an uncontrollable curiosity. He knew that when he opened the door, his life would change forever. He acted on impulse. Samuel, who was always so proper and planned everything, let his instincts take over. With trembling hands, he turned the knob and pushed the door open. What he saw took his breath away. There were no stairs or basement, but a strong, pulsating silver light. The icy wind was now a breeze that smelled of stardust and a strange scent, part metal and part stone. Inside the door, time and space seemed to cease to exist. It was a portal, a passageway to something inexplicable, an invitation impossible to refuse. In an act of courage, Samuel stepped through the portal. In an instant, the attic and his normal life were gone. Instead of the darkness of the place, he found himself under a sky that was not that of Earth. Looking down, his feet did not touch the wooden floor, but a fine gray sand that stretched across an empty and beautiful landscape. The silence was total. Only his own breathing could be heard. Gravity was weaker, lighter. Samuel took a step and floated a few inches before landing lightly on the ground. The reality he knew had been replaced by a scene from a science fiction movie. He was in a place that people only see in dreams. The sky, a deep black, had millions of stars shining with an intensity he had never seen before. But what caught his attention most was the giant blue and white globe on the horizon. It was Earth, his home. The feeling of being so close, and yet so far away, was unbelievable. Samuel, the man who always avoided risks, had found the opposite of his routine. The moon. He was on the moon. The door in his attic was a portal to another planet. It took a while for it to sink in. Surprise mixed with joy and adrenaline. He, an ordinary architect, had become an astronaut by chance. The euphoria of the initial moment, however, gave way to a wave of panic. He was in an unknown place, miles away from home, and had no idea how to get back. The door, the portal that had brought him there, looked like a small spot on the vast lunar horizon, and he felt a pang of despair. He looked back at Earth, and the beauty of the planet, which had once fascinated him, was now a reminder of what he might have lost forever. The reality, however, was more complex. Samuel realized that the door was a two-way bridge. The portal had not disappeared. It remained there, like a silver point of light in the middle of the gray landscape, an umbilical cord connecting his normal life to this new universe. Tranquility returned, replacing fear. He had a way back. With that certainty, curiosity, the same curiosity that had led him to the attic, drove him to explore. He spent the whole night on the moon. The lower gravity allowed him to jump in what felt like short flights, and he moved with a lightness he had never felt on Earth. The gray sand, which he thought was dust, seemed to have crystal particles that sparkled in the starlight. The landscape was one of absolute silence. The earth and the sky was his only company. There was so much new information and so many new sensations that Samuel felt his mind, previously so tied to everyday life, expanding. He felt alive in a way that the boredom of his routine had stifled. The day on the moon, which lasts about 28 Earth days, was far from dawn. Samuel felt hungry and the need to return home. The reality of his family, his wife, and his children called him back. His duty as a father and husband was the anchor that kept him connected to his life on Earth. He returned to the door. As he walked through it again, he felt the stuffy, dusty air of the attic. He looked at the door and realized that the silvery glow was gone, and the rock-like texture had returned to that of an ordinary door. The doorknob, once cold, now had the normal temperature of metal. The passage was closed. The search for an answer consumed him in the weeks that followed. Samuel went up to the attic every night, always at the same time he had discovered the door. He tried every possibility. He pulled the lever, touched the door, and waited for the silver glow to return. But nothing happened. The door remained inert, looking like just a normal entrance. What he had experienced on the moon seemed like a dream. However, the smell of stardust, the sound of silence, and the feeling of lightness he had experienced haunted him, proving that it had all been real. He thought the door was a one-time event, a one-night adventure. Then, on a full moon night, what was supposed to be another failed attempt turned into a new surprise. Samuel, in the attic, saw a ray of white light coming from a small attic window, hitting the door. The door, which had previously looked normal, glowed with silver light again. The rock texture reappeared, and the doorknob became cold to the touch. The door was open again. Samuel understood the secret. The door only opened on nights with a full moon. On the nights of his journey, he prepared in advance. He left a note for his wife, who thought he was staying up late working on projects, and went up to the attic. There, he waited for the moment when the moonlight hit the door, activating the portal. With each trip, Samuel's curiosity grew. He wanted to understand what was happening, not just experience the adventure. The main question, which had haunted him since the first time, was breathing. How could he, an ordinary man, breathe on the moon? The answer came in an unexpected way. During one of his walks on the lunar surface, he noticed that the air, even though it was cold and had a metallic smell, was not the vacuum that scientists describe. It was a kind of atmosphere, subtle, almost imperceptible. Samuel realized that this atmosphere was a product of the portal itself. When the portal opened, it was not just a passageway, but a generator. It created a small field of breathable air around it, expanding for a few dozen meters from the door. It was as if the door brought a small piece of earth with it, a bubble of oxygen that ensured the safety of those who passed through it. The air was thin and different, but it was enough to sustain life. He was, in a way, in an invisible bubble. The second big question was why the door existed, and why it only opened with the light of the moon. Samuel, the architect who plans everything, used logic. For him, the door was not magic, but unknown technology. He began to see the portal as a kind of machine, an invention of a very advanced civilization. The lever that opened it the first time was just a trigger. The force that activated the machine was the light of the full moon. He imagined that, somehow, the moonlight had a special energy, a frequency that activated the components of the portal. It was like a switch that only worked with the specific energy source. And the full moon, at its brightest, was that energy source. The door, then, was a kind of interplanetary beacon. But for whom? And why? Samuel had no answers to these questions, but the theory that he was interacting with technology, rather than a supernatural event, comforted him. His architect's mind saw the door as a structure, a design, something that had been built, and that was a puzzle he was willing to solve. He began to record every detail of his travels. He noted the amount of time he was exposed to moonlight, the air temperature, and even the texture of the lunar sand. He cataloged the stars and landscapes he encountered. He became a scientist by chance, searching for patterns in his new universe. Samuel's search for answers about the portal became increasingly intense. He wanted to understand the technology, the reason behind it all, and most importantly, if there was anyone else behind the door. This obsession caused him to become more distant from his family. One night, his eldest son, who was already a teenager, caught him leaving the attic with a notebook full of notes and drawings of stars. His son asked him what he was doing, and Samuel, not knowing what to say, lied. The lie, even though it was to protect his secret, hurt. He realized that his search for something big was threatening what was most important to him on Earth. The last straw came on a night with a full moon. Samuel prepared for his trip, but instead of going up to the attic, his wife called him to talk. She said she felt he was hiding something, that he seemed unhappy and distant. Her words hit him hard. He realized that the adventure that made him feel alive was actually causing his real life to fall apart. The door in the attic, which was his escape from monotony, had become a source of loneliness. He was traveling to the universe, but moving away from his own world. Samuel had to make a choice. He could continue his travels, seeking answers he might never find, or he could turn his attention to what really mattered. He went up to the attic, but this time, not to wait for the door to open. He sat down among the boxes and looked at the inactive portal. For the first time, he saw the door not as a promise of adventure, but as a reminder that his greatest discovery was not in the universe, but in his home. He decided to share his secret, not with the world, but with the person who mattered most, his wife. With his heart in his hand, he told her about the door, about the moon, about the nights of exploration. At first, she didn't believe him, but Samuel, with a sincere look, showed her the notebooks with his notes, drawings, and theories. He took her to the attic and promised that, on the next full moon, she would see it with her own eyes.